Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's webinar on running successful online meetings. Now, before we begin, I hope you all realise the irony of turning up to an online meeting to learn about online meetings. I hope that the irony is not lost on anyone. We're hosting this webinar as part of our ongoing support of the sport and recreation and not-for-profit sectors in Australia. And this session follows previous webinars that we've run on grant writing, building club resilience, and safely shutting down your club, all due to the coronavirus crisis. If you missed them, I'm happy to say that the recordings of our past webinars are all available from a link at cprgroup.com.au/webinars. So do feel free to go and have a look there to see any of the ones that you may have missed, and all of the future sessions will get posted there as well. For those of you who I haven't had a chance to meet, and there are lots of people on this evening's session, so welcome to everyone. And we have some people from, a lot of people from Queensland and some people joining us from interstate as well, so welcome. My name's Michael Connelly and I'm the Managing Director of CPR Group. One of the roles that we play sees us working regularly with councils and state and national sporting bodies and community associations on things like recreation planning projects, master plans, sport and recreation strategies, parks and open space strategies, plans for hall and museum strategies and similar. But one of the most enjoyable parts of our role is when we get to help clubs, really hands-on in clubs and all sorts of not-for-profit organisations, to run, as we say, not like a business, but as the businesses that they are. So this involves club planning, training and governance advice, and yes, going to lots and lots of meetings, hence why we're presenting this session on running great meetings online tonight. If you had a look, the blurb for this evening's webinar said that I've been running formal meetings since I was in junior high school. And I must admit that that is true, mainly because it turns out that I was better off being captain of a committee than captain of a football team. I'd also like to introduce you this evening to Steve Connelly, who's our Director of Sport and Community Development. Good evening, Steve.
Thank you, Michael. Gosh, I look so happy in that photo. Thanks for choosing that one. Welcome to all of those familiar names I can see on the list. Great to see so many people getting involved in these webinars. And to those of you who I haven't met, I'm the Director of Sport and Community Development on our team. And as Michael said, yeah, we get off on making the lives of volunteers easier, and that's why this evening we're here to talk about online meetings. Thanks, Michael.
Great. So, Steve, there's a chance for people to ask questions. So I'll leave it to you this evening to curate the questions as they come in. You'll see that there's the opportunity in the sidebar in the Q&A section there where you can post any questions, and Steve will keep an eye on those as we're going through, and let us know when we get towards the end of the session. We'll have some time for questions at the end. If there are any that we don't get a chance to go through in the interests of time, we will get back to everyone tomorrow at the latest with any answers or an invitation to catch up if your questions get a little bit more complicated. I would like to begin talking about online meetings by saying, wahoo, finally. This is one of those silver linings that you see. There's really two things that have struck out to me just today. The first one is that all of a sudden there's a lot more people in the park. Where I go running, there's a lovely long running track around a park here, and the kids and I go running there just about every day. And it is fascinating to see how many more people are taking this forced downtime, as we're calling it, and really making the most of it. There are families that we've never seen out before, and that is fantastic. The other thing that is absolutely wonderful is that we've been using tools to have online meetings and to connect online for literally more than 16 years. And it took social isolation to increase the uptake of online meetings to the point where now even the naysayers are online. So it's fantastic, and I'm really happy to be able to be talking to you about this topic tonight. We do talk a lot about meetings, and for those of you who have had a chance to have a listen to our podcast, you'll see that that was a topic that Steve and I spoke about over the last couple of weeks as well. But this evening I want to focus on some things that are a little bit different. So I want to talk about the meetings very briefly, but then get into how a meeting online is a little bit different and takes a little bit of a different type of etiquette and different type of meeting procedures than a typical meeting when we're face-to-face. So regardless of whether we're meeting in person or using technology, a question that I ask a lot is, well, why do we have meetings? if we didn't have meetings of committees, if our organisations weren't run by groups of elected officials, then we'd have a dictatorship where it would really be run by only one person. I am a fan of dictatorships on the sole condition that I get to be dictator. If anyone else is dictator, I'm probably not going to like it. And that's probably the case for everybody else. Hence why it's far better that we have committees that can make decisions on behalf of an organisation. So when I ask this question, why do we meet? Why should we have meetings in seminars or in training workshops? I get lots of answers like, well, we need to meet to have discussions, or we need to meet to come up with ideas. I'm asking a question, is that right? Or to communicate? Or is it because we like each other's company? Or is it because we open the wine before we open the meeting? Realistically, though, we have meetings for one important reason, and that reason is to make decisions. Here I am talking about formal meetings. So these are the meetings typically that you'll have once a month that are a management committee meeting, or less frequently if they're a general meeting. So formal meetings are the time when we take the outcomes of our regular communication, our ideas, and come up with the decisions about, firstly, if we'll implement those ideas, and then if so, how, when, and who. So decisions for clubs, I think, are probably more important than people think. I've been in meetings where a decision has been delayed, and the reason for a delay could be anywhere on a spectrum from somewhere, genuinely trying to wait until we've got more information, through to maybe the chairperson or somebody else trying to be manipulative. Now, that could be allowing factions to try and gain support. So starting, I suppose, at the seemingly innocuous end of the continuum, and seriously, if you get into a meeting and you need more information, you weren't ready for the meeting. And even on the other end of the spectrum, if you're letting a dictatorial chairperson manipulate democracy in your club, come on, you need to get detailed help with your meeting procedures in the first place. You've got to raise your meeting game to another level. So, and look, that's what we do. So we do this all of the time. But one example that I've seen was in a meeting at a regional sporting association where a decision was put to the board, and instead of asking the board to make that decision, the chairperson at the time said that they really needed to, and I quote, slow things down so that we can consult with all of our clubs and all of their members. Now, this wasn't a decision that needed broad consultation. The consultation had been done. It was an open and shut issue, and it was a board decision that should have been made, and it was not contentious. So I was left wondering in this case, this is one of those little red flag moments. Now, is the chairperson afraid of making the wrong decision in the eyes of some members, or afraid of change? We're all scared of change to a certain extent, or maybe afraid of actually having to do something to help grow the association. But really, I think that regardless, if you're on this continuum, both ends are guilty of really missing the point. Any delay in making a decision is actually a decision in itself. The decision not to make a decision. And really, is that the way that organisations who are going to be successful are going to progress? I genuinely don't think so. This sort of delaying thinking holds back progress. It's far more important to make the decision as soon as you have the information that you need. And formal meetings are where those decisions happen. The need to make decisions hasn't slowed down like 2020's sporting seasons have slowed down. The need for us to make decisions remains. Now, even in normal periods of downtime, we need to make decisions. So committees will meet out of season to make decisions about things like uniforms, and that's everything from who our supplier will be to how much we budget for our uniforms, even to new designs for our uniforms. The downtime in our off-season is typically a good time to deal with budgeting issues and maybe to renegotiate leasing conditions and those sorts of things that can happen when we're not distracted by our day-to-day operations, and we can get into the more strategic areas of operation. The current coronavirus-driven shutdown decisions may be around things that we spoke about in our webinar last week about what sort of insurance may we be able to ease up a little bit during this shutdown. Things like how often will we need to put water on the field? And really topical at the moment is, what is our refund policy at the moment? And that's something that is going to take a continual input of information and good, robust discussion and debate to be able to determine the best decisions that we can make at different stages. And I say decisions meaningfully there because the decision that we make today, or the decision that we advised last week, was let's adopt a wait and see attitude and communicate that to members. Once more information comes to light, and once we realize, or once we set a line in the sand saying this is the information we will need before we make the next decision, and then we make the next decision. Keep in mind that any decision that has a financial implication on your association or your club should be made by the committee as a whole, not just the treasurer. So you do need to keep meetings going so that you can be making formal decisions under the importance of your constitution, even during periods like now when we're in social isolation. The use of technology is really, it gives us an ability that we haven't had up until, well, in Queensland particularly, up until 2007, when that was the first time that it was introduced in the Act, that we could use technology to have our meetings. So long as people could actively participate in a meeting as the discussions took place, then they could be considered attendees at that meeting. And that was a big step forward, and it was really, really good. During the current shutdown, because of coronavirus, we can't meet in person. It's just not possible anymore. So what can we do? It was interesting. Steve and I were talking earlier today about a question that has come up, that had already come in for today's session, about whether or not you can have meetings using email. And now we discussed here that the answer is kind of yes and kind of no. While you can usually make decisions in writing without having a meeting, if your constitution allows it, it's still not the same as having a meeting. So if you can do that, it will be called in your constitution something along the lines of making decisions without a meeting. Our advice here is typically, although it's there and although you've got the ability to do that, I kind of advise against it wherever possible. And so that's even instead you having meetings by technology. And this is because of the value of structured debate over the issues on which you're deciding. If an email just gets sent around and people don't necessarily give it the due consideration, the idea may not grow properly. It might not be fantastic. Now, how many times have you been to a meeting and you've taken an idea into that meeting and you thought it was perfect in every way, only to have the discussion and the debate that happened around that idea add more bells and more whistles to your idea that actually made it better? This is what's missed if you do it all just in writing. Now, email and things like messenger groups, to be honest, I think are terrible forms of communication. They're great for getting information out, but they're terrible forms of communication because they are asynchronous, which means that the information is only going one way at a time. It's just information out. It's exactly like having a walkie-talkie and holding down that push-to-talk button, which means nobody else can say anything while you're talking. And you know that there are people on those groups and in those email trails that like to go on and on and on. And the messages that they write are really easy to misinterpret. There's no allowance for tone of voice or the interpretation of the true meaning behind the words when it's just one-way asynchronous written communication. And it's very easy to assume passive aggression in those sorts of communication. So when you're using technology for meetings, the advice here is actually have the meetings. Don't just have long-winded written chat fests, because they really don't add any value. There are lots of platforms available, and this is what is so wonderful that we live in the future and we have access at our fingertips to free, at least in the beginning stages, access to all of these wonderful platforms. This is by no means expected to be an exhaustive list, and nor is it a recommendation for you to use any one of these platforms. Our advice is use the platform that you are most comfortable using. And by you here, I mean everyone who you will be communicating with here. So some organisations, some business organisations who now have their working teams disparate and lots of people working from home may have settled on a platform. For those still on Microsoft platforms, that may be Microsoft Teams or Skype for Business. But it's more important that everybody is comfortable with it than which platform here you choose. There are some differences in the way that these different tools work. For instance, Skype, just your standard personal Skype, is really more of a group video call, and a tool like Zoom is more of a meeting where you need to schedule the meeting, send an invitation to the meeting, the people click on the link, which is the invitation to the meeting, and then they are an attendee in the meeting. So there are some differences in the way that the platforms work. So it's important that you do get familiar with them. Google and YouTube are your friends here to give you any information that you might want to learn to be able to see how you can use the tools most effectively. When you get into them, you can then decide what type of screen you like to be looking at. Do you like to only see one person talking, the person who is talking on a big screen, or do you prefer to see everyone in a grid view? Now, some of these platforms have options where you can choose how you want it to look, and I suggest that you try them out and see what you like best. Our experience with quite literally all of the platforms that I have on this screen has been more than good enough to get by, and I mean that quite literally. They've all been very, very good. There are some costs to some of the systems here, and it's important to keep that in perspective. So where Messenger and Skype are typically free, the others have free offerings as you get into them, and then paid versions as you go up the line of features. For instance, Zoom currently has a 40-minute maximum for group video calling in the free version, and so then you need to then pay the monthly subscription fee to get longer meetings than that with more than 2 people. Now, even when social isolation rules get lifted, I think that the cost of subscriptions to these, if you do choose to pay the subscription fees, is still going to be cheaper than the combined cost of all of the fuel that you'll all spend getting to a clubhouse or some central venue for regular meetings anyway. So it's important to keep any cost in perspective and realize that these tools add a lot of value to the way that you do business. And time is really valuable. Even though we're not paying our volunteers for their time, that time is really, really valuable. So let's now have a look at the types of meetings that we can have using technology. Firstly, we have committee meetings. Committee meetings are the ones that we have typically once a month or thereabouts, and they are for our elected officials to manage the day-to-day business of the club. We've then got general meetings, and the general meetings are the meetings where all of our members of the class of membership that is eligible to vote can attend and can vote and can have their say. We then have subcommittee meetings, and subcommittees are the smaller groups that usually have an operational purpose. So it's quite common to have a group like a facilities and grounds subcommittee, and we can delegate some decision-making power to those groups, and they will also have fairly regular meetings. Then we've got delegate meetings, and our delegate meetings are the ones where we have a group of delegates who are elected to go and represent, say, our club at a regional association. And finally are our members' forums. So each of these meetings has a different meeting frequency. For instance, committee meetings occur under Queensland legislation at least once every 4 months. General meetings, the only one you need to have is the AGM. Subcommittee meetings you can have as required. Now, for an event subcommittee, for instance, in the lead up to the event, it's quite likely that these meetings will be held fairly regularly. Delegate meetings may be at a frequency of monthly at the beginning of a season and then maybe slip back to quarterly or even less frequent once things get rolling. It's the members' forums where we think you actually get really good member engagement. Now, practically, you can have any one of these types of meetings using technology. So all of these could be online meetings. What you need to keep in mind, however, is that the small meetings, say a committee meeting and a subcommittee meeting, may be fine to have as using the typical tools that we've just looked at, because you might have 6 or 9 people on those online meetings, and that is manageable where we're all participating together. However, once we get into the larger meetings, so a general meeting, a members forum, or some large delegate meetings, you may need to have greater control over the ability to give other people the right to speak during those meetings, for instance. So for instance, we're using Zoho Meeting to run tonight's webinar, and we have the ability at the administration end to be able to turn on and off people's microphones So that means that if we have a large group as we do this evening, we're able to control who can speak at any one time so that we can maintain a nice even flow of communication. This does take a little bit of that wonderful word, trust, to make sure that the people administering or moderating the online meetings are doing the right job. But you should keep in mind that when we're running online meetings, we certainly don't want it to turn into a schmozzle or a shambles. I'd now like to share with you some really simple rules for online meetings. They're not really rules. These are just things that are going to help you as you're running your online meetings. I take that back. The first one absolutely is a rule. No Brady Bunch jokes. Seriously, people, enough is enough. Yes, we know it looks like a Brady Bunch screen. Let's leave it at that. Once we get into the serious stuff, though, keep in mind that an online meeting, particularly for something like a committee meeting, is still a meeting. Technically, under the Act, it is still a meeting. So follow the usual rules of meetings. The control that we can generate by having people turn up at the right time, on time, running on time, sticking to a set agenda and having control by a moderator, in this case, the chairperson, means that we should actually be able to do a better job than usual in running really tight formal meetings. I can advise that using a headset is really good advice. Now, you've probably been in some meetings, and for those of you who are in organisations that have some people working remotely now, it is really distracting when you're getting a lot of background noise and the garbage truck will go past and all of a sudden it gets really, really loud. So more out of respect for everybody else, if you have a headset, use it. If you don't have a headset, go and grab the headphones that came with your mobile phone and use them. If you don't have a headset and the headphones that came with your mobile phone don't plug into your computer, seriously, go and buy a headset. It makes a massive difference. It's far more comfortable to listen, and it makes a massive difference for everyone else in the call, and therefore saves lots of time from people saying, "Oh, who was talking?" You know what I'm talking about. And then we get to the camera. Turn it on. Now, seriously, people don't care what you look like without makeup, or that you haven't done your hair, or that you may even still be sitting there in your jammies with your slippers on. That's okay. Especially in these times of social isolation, it's really important to have some connection with the people. And look, we're all in this together. We're all friends. We're all from the same organisation. We all joined that organisation with the same passion in mind. So let's connect. Let's use our time of social isolation as a chance to stay connected, even though we can't actually be with people. So it is a great idea to turn the camera on, and we'll get used to it. When you're not speaking, it's a great idea to turn your mic onto mute. It mutes the background noise in exactly the same way as it'll mute if you need to sneeze or cough or make any other noises that other people don't want to hear. So it's a good idea to do that. And it's not only because it cuts out all of the background noise, it also means that the focus can remain on the person or people who are participating at that time. Like any meeting, I can strongly advise to start the meeting on time. Recognising, of course, that this is going to be a formal meeting run under the same rules as in your constitution. As soon as you have a quorum, you can kick the meeting off, and that's what we certainly advise. There's no excuse for getting stuck in traffic when people are already at home starting to participate in the meeting. And again, like all rules of meetings, stick to the agenda. Be prepared before the meeting, though. And we've got some great tools for agendas and for minutes and for minute keeping templates for all types of meetings. So if you'd like to have some copies of those, please contact us via our website and we'll be very happy to get some out to you. But it is important that you stick to them. It's very easy to start talking about people's dogs and cats, and seriously, I've even seen hermit crabs on some online meetings recently. So don't get stuck doing that for too long. It's okay to connect, but when it's time to get into the meeting, start on time and stick to the agenda. Once the meeting is finished, of course, then you can get into the social part of the call as well. But those who need to go can go in exactly the same as we would teach for any sort of meetings. On the agenda is where you should write down the idea that you would like to turn into a decision that can then get implemented. Do your homework so that the agenda is really well prepared. The better prepared the agenda is, the better the meeting will run. And as you're going along through the meeting, summarize regularly so that everyone understands what decisions are being made as we're tracking and so that everybody can keep up. It's also important that the secretary isn't trying to interpret what people are thinking, because people are saying exactly what the decision is that we want to make, and that was on the agenda as the motion. And to reiterate, if you'd like some help with agendas and minutes, please contact us via our website. And finally, when you finish on time, you're already at home. There's no more waiting in traffic to get home. The travel time home is home. Finished at 7, home at 7. That's fantastic. So you can really enjoy that. And this is part of the reason that we genuinely hope that once we come out of the coronavirus-driven shutdown, we will have a greater uptake for online meetings going on from here. So to summarize, start on time, stick to your agenda, and finish on time. So I'd like to invite Steve to share any questions that have come in now.
Yes, we've had a good number of questions come in. A lot of them have been answered already during your presentation. So we had a couple of comments made about the email meetings. Also, just before you started talking about meeting platforms, we had a question come in, what is the best meeting platform? So I don't think that we need to go over that again. There've also been a couple of good comments made about internet speed and the impact that can have on audio and video quality. Obviously, no surprises to anyone who'll be listening in. On that, we typically will have our mobile phones as a backup. So if we even pre-COVID shutdown, as Michael mentioned, have been making good use of a range of online meeting tools. Even, our head office is smack bang in the middle of Maroochydore CBD, and even there we have temperamental NBN internet. So we're abundantly aware that not everywhere in Australia has the internet speeds that nerds like us would love to see. But there are different ways to back up. So if you turn your video off, that can assist with audio quality. But if even then you're still struggling with that jittery voice that Michael mentioned earlier, there's always the backup option of a conference call using your mobile phone, and most modern smartphones have got the ability to combine a number of calls into the one. One good question that's come in as well: how do you get people to discuss and engage in what's going on during the meeting? So I've got some good ideas on that, but I'll pass over to you, Michael, to have a crack first, if you like.
Yeah, look, this is a really important point and one that we talk about all the time. However, it's a lot easier under usual circumstances, because the answer to that question is typically you should have discussions all the time. When you're standing on the sideline next to people, when you are standing at the canteen waiting for a bucket of chips next to people. However, we're not next to people at the moment. So I think that Steve, I'll throw back to you on this one, but I would certainly add the fact that we need to capitalise on people's passion, remembering that we are all in this together and we all join for the same reason. It's a love of our sport or our organisation.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And also, one of the discussions that came up in our podcast just last week was the fact that that engagement should be inherent, as you just mentioned, Michael, at committee meetings and the like, and there shouldn't really be anything that's being presented to a management committee meeting that is brand new, for the first time at that meeting, because of those discussions that should be happening between meetings that might be more reasonably happening, typically monthly rather than once every 4 months, which is just the statutory minimum in Queensland. But there should be a good level of understanding of the sorts of things that we're going to be deciding upon at that meeting. And as Michael's mentioned, good preparation and a really tight agenda certainly helps to facilitate that. Another question that came in, Michael, you did mention that people can go to our website. A specific question has come in: can we have access to meeting agenda templates?
Yes, so most definitely. Yeah, so we can share those out from tomorrow. We'll get those out to the attendees tomorrow, because it really does help to have access to a very good, tight agenda template so that you've got a great starting point. And now this might also be a good time to have a quick look at the bottom of the screen here. On the far right of the screen, you can see our logo for Meeting Track there. That's our online meeting management platform. Now, I've been conscious of not making this just an ad for Meeting Track, but it is a fantastic program because of the way that it sets your agenda. You can establish your own agenda template for the things that you need to talk about regularly at your meetings, and then it keeps all of your minutes in the one place in the cloud. So it is walking the talk, and it is making the best use of technology. For everyone who participates in one of our webinars, one or more of our webinars, we are offering extended free trials or free access to both Asset Track, our online asset management system, and Meeting Track this year by way of helping get people through the current crisis. So I'd like to say thank you to everyone who has attended this evening's session, and I do hope that you can put to good use some of the tools and some of the tricks that we've been able to talk about this evening. The rest of the questions, Steve, that I've seen have come in, we will get back to you tomorrow on those by way of answer. Now, the sign-up link for next week's webinar, which will be on using your forced downtime wisely, will be live in the morning. So to stay in touch there, cprgroup.com.au/webinars. And of course, if you haven't already done so, please do sign up to our website, because we're pushing lots of useful information out on all of the platforms and on social media at the moment. And we're trying to make it in the same way as we've really focused on how you can use these tools. We're trying not to just regurgitate the information that you can already get elsewhere on the web. We're trying to make sure that the information that we're sharing with you is stuff that you can use practically and quickly to help you deal with what is a difficult time. But if you take the positivity of the fact that now we've got people using online meetings, and that hopefully that will continue, then it's a great opportunity for being able to continue doing things really well into the future. So thank you very much again for participating in this evening's session, and we look forward to your company again next week.